Hi, everyone. My name is Sona Porter, and I am here today, and I'm thrilled to kick off a special interview series featuring the leaders of the Washington State Coalition of African Community Leaders, or WSCACL, as it is commonly known as. And to start with, I am honored to be talking with Martha Lucas, the executive director of WSCACL. Martha has decades of experience leading efforts that empower African descent communities across Washington State, and today she will share with us insights about WSCA's mission, its leadership programs, and the upcoming annual summit. Thank you so much for joining us, Martha.
Thank you, Sona.
The first question that I want to ask you, for those meeting you for the first time, can you share a bit about yourself from growing up in Seattle and becoming WSCA's executive director?
Yeah, just briefly, there's a lot that happened in between, but I'm a proud Seattleite, Garfield graduate, Bulldogs for life, as well as a double Husky, and I know a lot of people like to identify or like you to kind of be put in one box. I consider myself both African because I was raised in an African household, but also African American because I've been in the U.S. since I was 2 years old. And the other part of me is for someone who has moved around. I've lived in the Midwest, I've lived in the South, I've lived on the East Coast, and I've also lived in California. And I'm definitely a West Coast girl. I mean, a Northwest girl. So there are some things about me whenever I go abroad, even in Europe, that when I meet another person from the Northwest, we are very much similar. So I do hold a few identities, and but I'm proud of all of them, and I know that in terms of shaping my leadership, it came from all of those spaces from growing up in University of Washington housing, family housing. And so just being exposed from a very young age, from daycare, basically on to education, its importance, as well as my parents, typical African immigrants. But just the curiosity, the kind of open mind, and not being so set in my beliefs in some areas, really came from that exposure. I also, grew up in Laurelhurst because of Union Bay living, or the student housing, and with a whole diversity, especially with my childhood of different community members. And so that really shaped me into believing that there was more things that we had in common than we had apart, and having best friends from all nationalities, and childhood friends. I really got to get exposed to other continents and cultural foods, and so I know a lot of people kind of are always confused about my ability to use chopsticks and other things, but that all came from my exposure and my upbringing. And my parents were our tribe, we're from northern Tigray, are also known for being much more like open to other cultures. And so definitely as I've gotten older, I've seen the difference in, what that has been able to actually help me in terms of opportunities, because of, a lot of exposure to things that I probably wouldn't have gotten if I didn't grow up where grew up, if I wasn't in an African family, if I wasn't, raised as a proud Black girl. So yeah, I feel very lucky and fortunate. And one of the biggest things I think that shaped my leadership early on was, that Northwest part of we, as you can see by all the different companies that have been innovated or founded in Washington State, we're taught from a very young age to be creative, to be innovative. And so, I see, especially when you come from kind of an immigrant background, a lot more people who feel there's kind of one way or a literal, they take things a little bit more literal. Whereas because of my upbringing in the Northwest, I have always been taught to basically, if you can get to the same answer, it doesn't matter, just show your work kind of attitude. And so, I got really good, especially with a writing background, to being able to justify, coming up to with some alternative ways of getting to an answer from kindergarten. And so by the time I became an adult and I'm now, knew that I wanted to go into management, yeah, I didn't see things as just black and white. I saw that, hey, if you can listen, especially to who you're leading, listen to those in the front lines, you often can find solutions, and not to really have this preconceived idea of what is the right way. So when things have been counter to what I've thought, I've always accepted those who know, those who are closest to the work, as being the right people to be able to dictate, what is a way to go? What are the solutions for the issues that are coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. What a beautiful life experience that you've had. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do remember you always talking about you came to the U.S. when you were 2 years old, right?
Well, actually, technically, because I've heard people say it different ways. We migrated, or we left right after I was baptized. So I'm what you call in the Orthodox. I'm Christian. I was raised Christian Orthodox, and what you call cradle baptized. So that's usually for girls between 4 to 6 months, and so right after I was baptized is when we left Ethiopia and we went to Canada. We went to DC and then in Canada, and I ended up in Seattle at 2 years old.
Okay. And speaking of growing up in Seattle, you have described yourself as a proud Seattle native and also a double husky, right? Husky, and someone who identifies as an African and African American. How have your upbringing and your education and your identity shaped your leadership style at WSCACL?
So yeah, it shaped it quite a bit. And one of the things that shaped a lot of it is again my childhood. I know it became a buzzword about diversity and working in racial and social justice and all these things. Well, when you grow up low income and in kind of a wealthy neighborhood, a lot. You learn a lot, and you're exposed to a lot, sometimes. And so that whole commonality of all of our parents being students, really, even though most of the folks, and I think even to this day, that live in student family housing are international. And so, I had a neighbor who's South American, Korean, Vietnamese, from all over. And so that exposure of, seeing how, parents can give you the same, you have the same kind of expectations for their kids. And I just really remember from a very young age being really curious to meet different people and to understand, like, what is it that we have in common. And I really credit that to my upbringing, because the more I was exposed, the more I learned that we have a lot more in common. And so why are we fighting, and why is there so much conflict between groups? And it didn't matter to me whether it was Asian and Black, or Asian and African, or anybody. I couldn't really understand why we were fighting when we often want the same things for our kids and the same things for our family members. And so it became kind of a lifelong mission to figure out like where I should land and what I wanted to do. And in middle school in sixth grade, credit to Cindy, who was my friend back then, but her sister came and she to our career day, and she taught us. So her career was hotel management, and so that's the first time. And I knew instantly at 11 years old I wanted to go into management. Now, of course, I started with hotel, and so that led me to take Japanese, because a lot of Japanese businessmen ran hotels. And so it also led me to, any opportunity. There was a career day or there was any kind of career function to go into like the hotel industry. And so just imagine starting at 11. So, my exposure into like science and math, everything came from me setting that as my goal. But the counter to that is naturally, actually, out of my whole family, I took after my father, and I'm a natural introvert. And so, because I set that, I knew that that's what was my purpose, I guess, if you can say. I spent time to work against my natural tendency. So I backpacked through Europe, by myself, basically, because I knew it would force me to talk to people. And that's how I became comfortable doing presentations and to do that work, where it was not my natural, tendency. And I would get really, really nervous. And so, yeah, it was a process because, again, a lot of things were not natural to me. Facilitating meetings, as an example, it actually even is against my culture to like cut people off or to, so I had to work against that when I first started. Oh, I was awful, because it was really hard for me to do it. But I knew I wanted to be effective. And so I worked at it. And so to me, motivation is the biggest key. And when you're motivated, it doesn't matter even what is your natural personality. It will move you to do things and to find ways to get out of that uncomfortable zone.
Absolutely. When you talk about that leadership instincts that you had at 11, it's very evident in you. When people meet you for the first time, the passion, shows everything that it's in you, that this is something that you want. You're just not there for, for the accolades or whatever it is. So definitely at 11 years old, that is impressive, Martha. The next question that I want to ask as we move on with this interview is, since stepping into this role as Executive Director of WSCACL, what is the most surprising or inspiring thing about WSCACL members? What is one thing that surprised you the most or inspired you the most about them?
I think what inspired me the most, it's actually with Ma'awa. When people will say that they want to improve something in their community, and we are all busy, and we all have other competing initiatives and family and all kinds of different things. But when she came to me one day and said, like, I really mean, like, we need to improve voter engagement, and she came up with a plan to do a ballot drive, and I was just in awe because I know she's basically a single mother with 4 kids and was president of the Gambian Association, Northwest Gambian Seattle Association, sorry. And I just couldn't, and also, a manager of like 6 facilities. And I couldn't understand how she can do it, but she was determined, and we ended up, getting 250 ballots, turned in. And so just to see to see someone who would come and be humble enough to know, like, okay, this is not what I'm good at, and be willing to take that assistance or the mentorship, as well as, passion, be passionate in an area and willing to follow it all the way through. She's like one of the first. And so I was always very happy to, support, in any way that I could, because, that's, for anyone who's been a mentor, that's what you want is to be able to see people grow, because as I can say for myself, I am who I am because of all the people who poured into me and mentored me. Because I've been told the reason they wanted to mentor me was because I was compliant. I wanted to learn. I wanted to get better. And so, it's not to say that I understand that some people say, okay, I can go quicker to wherever I want to go, by being mentored. But it surprised me, to your point, is what surprised you is how many people said they wanted a mentor, but they really had something else in mind. And so Ma'awa, you, Daniel, there's about 10 that I think really actually meant it. And I'm very honored to have seen them grow and to do a lot of what they're, wanted to do, set out to do because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone would be happy to have you as a mentor because you are a great mentor, Martha, if I can add on to that. Let's move on to WSCACL's mission and vision, right?
Okay.
In your own words, how would you describe WSCACL's role in the African diaspora community?
That's a good one. WSCACL's role is to, in my own words, is to be a platform to bring everyone together as a trusted space and to encourage collaboration across the communities because unity is how we grow and how we get stronger. And then also to be able to, I don't know if to say promote, but to explain the benefits of working together. I think that it's not that people don't want to work together. I don't think that everyone understands what everyone brings to the table. And so to have people, and sometimes it's, as simple as, for instance, for not just recent, but anybody who's immigrated to the U.S., if you didn't grow up in the U.S., navigating the school system, navigating, the legal, there's so many things, right? It's very difficult to learn that, especially when there's a crisis and you need that help. And so those who have been here can provide that insight, can provide how do you, grow up in racism and how do you navigate that? Because it's completely different if you've never experienced it all your life, right? And so, there are things that I have seen, which I understand that if you don't understand the other person's perspective, the other group's perspective, you're not gonna get it. But my benefit of having family members that grew up abroad and then me growing up here is like, we could see like, okay, I don't understand what you're doing, right? Like, and you don't understand what I'm doing. But because their family were a little bit more forgiving, right? And I wish that would be more the case for the general, because I think it's just easy for us to all stay in our silo, in our view, and be like, you're wrong, versus how do I understand where you're coming from, right? And so I can now, instead of causing the other group or the other person to be defensive, you're now trying to get to a solution as how to work together, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned that unity is the only way that the African communities here can be successful.
Right.
Is it fair, or would you say that lack of unity is one of the challenges that African community as a whole, not only within WSCACL, but as a whole is facing for the lack of, that success that we need to get to where we want to be?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask anybody, how do you define success? It's usually some method of independent wealth, okay? They don't always define it by a dollar figure, but it's independence mostly. But yet, if you ask that same person, how do you get there? Because, some people are better than others, admitting what their strengths are, or that they have some strength and some weaknesses. But yet, from a very young age, I always knew that I was more powerful as a group. And part of that, I'm sure, is because of my tribe is very much, group oriented. And so there are, when I'm in my community center or in the community, I can navigate very well because I understand, because, it's been around since I was young, or, I've been involved in it because of my relatives. But that idea that there's going to be things that Sona does that I can't do, and so we're stronger together, has been ingrained in me since I was a child. So coming to WSCACL, I understood like that it's better to do it as a group, because there's, even as a self-employed person, there's things that I know I'm not good at, and why try to work 80 hours a day? You know what I mean? Like instead, it would be better to work collectively. And I think that whether we're talking about African American, Caribbean, it doesn't matter. Like we 90% of Black entrepreneurs are sole proprietor. That is not the case with every ethnic group, but that is the case with us. And so that whole idea of I want to be, kind of that view of I want to be individually wealthy, but yet not understand there's so many things about African descent culture that promotes group and social, the social way that we operate. We're going against what we were doing back, from our roots, right? And so that part, even though I wasn't raised in Africa, that has always been in me, is that like we need to work together. And so I'm more willing to be patient, to find the right folks, to find the right contractors, to the point where, I'm really confident I can figure things out within 20 minutes after talking to somebody, but I had to get to that point. And I think that I see a lot of people who want certain things, but they seem to be a little disconnected with that whole part of working with others. Like if you want to go for the big amount of dollars, you're going to have to go in a partnership or in, you know what I mean? Even for the project, to partner in a project, to do something, for instance, at the Port of Seattle, to have a kiosk there, you have to be able to, from my understanding from going to Port of Seattle session, you have to be able to like cover it for 24/7, right? And so if you're not there, if you can't do that on your own, then you need to work in a group, right? And that could be hundreds of millions of dollars, but instead we'll kind of struggle at 30,000 or 40,000 because we want to do it all our way.
Yeah, absolutely. The coalition has, significantly grown over the years, from 20 to over 50 member organizations. What do you think is the driving force behind that growth?
I think staying on the mission, we've, which is why, I can say the mission, because we really pushed working together, working across communities. Another thing that doesn't get talked about, we talk about things when they're wrong. We don't talk about things sometimes when they're actually right. And one of the things, and I'm going to bring it back to my tribe, shout out to the Tigray tribe, is we're very fair. And so by nature, so we don't, we have loyalty, but we also have a fairness. And so from a young age, I was about, always, if I'm going to ask something of someone, I should be able to do it. And not, so you would never catch me telling someone to do something I haven't done and they haven't watched me do it. And so I know I get a lot of respect for that, that I'm not a dictator type leader. But I think it's important that, so number one, it's the idea of the fairness. And so no one can state that there was, any regional, right, preference. And so that's number one. That's where we got a lot of people from other regions coming to the table. The second thing that is important to state, because it wasn't there at the beginning, is consequences. And, there's just human nature. And it doesn't matter what group we're talking about. We're going to always go for the path of least resistance. And so if you start favoring or overlooking when people do not perform, when there is an expectation for the group, then you very quickly see people jump off. And I have something that is maybe not as known. I have been a volunteer. I've been, engaged in civic activities since I was 9 years old. And I've seen the exact same pattern that, small group, large group, when it comes to nonprofits or group dynamic, people lean on the 2 or 3 people who do all the work, and they just kind of expect, because no one feels comfortable asking other people to do work or to give consequences for lack of work. And then one by one, they drop out, and they stop, showing up, all the people you depended on. And so I made it a point that whenever I got into a leadership position, that would not be the case, that it would be fair distribution of work, that those who perform will be awarded, and those who don't have a consequence. And, they can choose to leave, they can choose whatever they want, but it will not be an expectation that only a few are going to be doing all of the work.
Yeah, I was just quickly going to ask, and you can quickly answer this, but what are the requirements for, someone who would want to join WSCA? What are the requirements? Like, say an organization reached out, right, community association, what are certain things that you look at and would be like, oh, we can, is it an open...
So it was, which leads us, I think, to another part, which is it has been open. But since the bylaws went into effect, actually, which was 2021, May of 2021, the original founders actually put membership dues in there. And we just never enacted it. Personally, I've been running kind of solo for a long time. Now we have a team and a very good accounting finance manager. Shout out to Serena, who is making sure, especially because it is a requirement with funders, as we are now in a position with a program manager who assists with grant making, as well as Serena, who handles all like the finance and the budgeting and stuff. But now we're in a position to do a lot more in terms of grant writing. And the demand is that we diversify our sources of income. They do not like only grant source of income. And so as a coalition, the next question becomes, who is your target audience? And, because we're not just, we're a coalition of members. And it was, as again, written into the bylaws in 2021, that, the membership dues needed to be enacted.
Right, exactly. And that is something that you mentioned, organizations were not paying for. Just briefly, what are some of the plans that you have that you would put forth to make sure that each member, is upholding that, like the dues, you have to pay?
Right.
There are certain plans that you have, because it has not been done for some time.
Yeah, never. It's never been done. So the plan will be, we'll do a membership drive, and it's going to be like in the fall, mostly. But so starting, it does have to go through the board. So it's on for the proposal for August meeting. But it would basically be there's the proposal, the way it's written, the way it's drafted. There's 3 tiers plus a student, so a 4th one for students, and it's within 90 days. So basically, 2 payments. You can either do 2 payments in 90 days or 1 payment, but it's not going to be going into the next fiscal year. There are a lot of reasons for that, in terms of if people are not familiar with the budgeting and with how that looks at the end of the year. But it is something we're doing a lot more now in terms of depreciation of assets and everything, because we do have an accounting manager who's on board.
Right. And the decision for the membership dues, the amount, who make those decisions?
So as executive director, I write the proposal, but I will say that it was written with the accounting manager. And so I will say that openly. That was with her knowledge and with, understanding like what that structure is. And then it is finalized by the board. So, yeah.
Right. Okay.
So they can
I,
make amendments.
right. I want you to walk us through the WSCACL leadership, right? I know there are committees within the leadership. Can you tell us how those committees operate, and how is the decision making? How do you make sure decision making happens where each member community member's voice is heard?
So, can we go back to that membership for a second?
Absolutely, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add that we're part of what we're doing with the membership benefits is we're actually promoting our own as professional services. So it's only BIPOC professional services that are providing free or I think free, and then there's some discounted services available. But shout out to Daniel, who's going to actually provide his photography and videography service that everyone has been, totally excited about and seen his very, quality work. And so, as well as accounting services, as well as consultation with me as a grant writer who has fundraised, over nearly $2 million. So these are all things that a nonprofit member or a business member is going to need. And since, recently and I know I'm moving to a grant situation, but recently when we launched our sub-granting with HEAL, which was the largest sub-granting that we've done to date, and we got 25 sub-grantees. The vast majority, I think, and I know for definitely in round one, 90% didn't have a grant before. And so we saw the struggle of doing the finance and understanding, again, back to that 90% of Black businesses are sole proprietors. Are you really, how many of them are out of inactive because they haven't paid their state or city taxes? I just think that it's really important that people understand, because I know organizations that have gone, have had their tax exemption revoked. And so we just want to make sure that we are, because as everyone knows in the leadership team, in the council, I promote one of the reasons I'm here is sustainability. I could see back in 2019 when I came from looking at my own community center, concern for sustainability and intergenerational training on how to take over organizations.
Okay, and just quickly, you mentioned that enrollment it's an open enrollment, right? But then with the enforcement of the member dues, are you guys planning to also, I don't know if this is something that's already existing, I'm not sure, but is there anything like an enrollment fee for new members that wants to come on board?
Enrollment fee? Well, other than the membership?
Yes.
Well, so the membership, and then there's ways to structure that so that you're not getting like everything, before getting, you know what I mean? So yes, we're going to definitely have that structured. Again, shout out to Serena for thinking about all those things. And that's huge. I mean, the more WSCACL grows, the important it is to have people invested and passionate on the team. So.
Absolutely. Circling back to my previous question, so I just want you to walk us through, the leadership structure, WSCACL's leadership structure, and also, explain to us how decisions are made to make sure every community, community member's voice is heard.
So I want to take actually a step back to the bylaw. And so under the bylaw, there are, because this is not always known, and so I want to make sure, since we have this opportunity to explain, because people get confused, like, why are you still there as an executive director versus what is the board role, right? So an executive director is a staff position, and so that's basically the board can fire me, right? It doesn't go up for an election, right? So then there's a board of directors who handle governance for the organization. And they are, they can, I think the current bylaws, they can do 2 terms, which would be 2 years each. So 4 years total. but so everyone has like different roles. So the member role, to your point, the members have a voice for elections, which we're coming up with an election. And so elections is where they have a voice and they get to select the board of directors. And they have a voice in, I think, certain purchases like real estate and things like that. So there are some privileges that are exclusive to members. Members can, I think, what we added as a board back in 2020 is that they can essentially overturn the entire board at a vote of like 2/3 or something. So that is something that isn't normally done, but we added that feature in there. So and we have, I think, a community advisory council that is normally like nominated through current board members. And so what is different is in 2022, I, in my role as executive director, made and who's proactive, I would like to say. I could see us growing. As you said, we had exponential growth even within 1 year at one point where we had like a 300% increase. And so I was concerned because, and this is where I think I can deviate, as American raised, we like to be proactive to what can happen when, things, not just like when you're here, but in the future. And so what I could foresee happening as we were getting more funding was a fight to try to sway the executive director to favor one group or another. And so to proactively make sure there was a protection in place, I proposed to the board basically having a community advisory council, which that council is made up of members. It's made up of every region sits on that council. Within the continent of Africa, every region within Africa also sits on that council. So there is no East versus West or South or anything. And we have different professions, different folks. Some people have been permanent and, volunteers and been involved in WSCACL from the beginning. Some are newer. And, there's fluctuations. Most of them come on through subgranting. But some of them are also appointed by myself as I'm looking to balance how many folks are in, and that there's regional representation. Barely as we are community oriented, I believe that there should be at least 2 to 3 from every community that wants to be involved, right?
Representation.
Yeah, to have representation and have that support, right? A partner. And so that was something that was enacted, and then also to give some power. So, I was allowed to test it, and I luckily for the then board chair Katiwe and the team allowed me to test kind of sharing power to see how that worked. And at first, I'm going to be open. It was not a great experience. People, unfortunately, when you're not empowered, you sometimes don't know how to use the power. And so I had to take a step back and see what I was seeing, which was, people have been through trauma. A lot of people have been through trauma, and I had to make adjustments. And so lucky for me, I am a survivor of abuse. I understood what I was seeing and how to navigate that. And then it came, it was like a slow turn instead of this immediate, which is what I wanted originally. And so now, as you know, because I know you sit there, there's definitely like operational things. And so there's a sharing of power with the executive director at the operational level. The board is governance. And so when there are issues that, council members come, have that they don't like organizationally is going on, we bring it to the council, there's a vote, and decisions are made from that. And so and we have a majority rules. Is yeah, it's not consensus, but it is majority rules, and we just move on. But yeah, so that's how. And then the committees, because not everybody wanted to be in one, kind of on a day-to-day situation or week-to-week situation. They didn't. Not everybody wanted to be with the youth and the family. Economic empowerment is one committee, joint committee, and then some people wanted to do civic engagement. So that's how we separated, and also days that they were available. That's how it got separated. So the committee members are actually the council members.
Right, exactly. And speaking of economic empowerment and civic engagement, these two are WSCACL's core strategy goals. How do these two work together to uplift the communities that you represent?
Yeah, it goes back to the mission. We are staying on the mission, which is being an influential voice of one. So that's where the civic engagement. And then that whole sharing of resources and enabling collaboration. So that's where the economic empowerment. And it comes out through getting translation or getting jobs that the leaders can do. And so just as a reminder, the committees and the council are made up of community leaders. I should clarify. It's not, they are community members, obviously, but they are actually leaders of communities, or they have a network if they're an individual. And so for each, I think the smallest African community, is like 200-ish. The largest is 50,000. And so just to know that each of those leaders who sit in that, so when you're asking how are community members' voices being heard, well, if one person is representing 300, and by that I'm saying that they're influential leaders, right, that they have been either elected or appointed, and they're able to outreach and to produce results in their community, and they have been tried and tested on that. So we have numbers from our previous outreach work, but we know that they have social media connections, and they have influence over their communities, and they're able to bring tens or hundreds of people along to get things.
Yeah, most of the time when we hear about economic empowerment, what comes to mind maybe are a few things such as jobs or businesses. How does WSCACL define what economic empowerment means, like broadly?
It means what the leaders say it means. So, there has been support in, if we're gonna take it there, we've supported really through our work with International Rescue Committee. We've had a workshop. We've done a workshop with the Puget Sound Sage and the United Way, King County. We've increased, we're going to go on the civic engagement side. So we've actually had members of WSCACL attend and participate in those leadership programs, formal leadership programs. We've had members of WSCACL who participated in the International Rescue Committee workshop. Shout out to Brother Emmanuel, for arranging that. Get loans that were in need of loans, get support financially for their businesses. We've, had folks, participate in a real estate, overview, wealth building, our summits, and they've gotten help building their credit, and they've gotten help qualifying for a home. So we've had people get jobs, actually a lot of people get jobs. And so, as well as scholarships for our youth and grants and college entrance. So we have success, and recently with the subgranting, we've subgranted $324,000 directly into the community.
That's
with
impressive.
that, and with that supported 25 subgrantees in 8 different counties across the state of Washington. And collectively, they impacted 32,000, over 32,000, or made awareness and education, 32,000 community members across the state, And then direct, I think, impact was over 1,000. So something like that, I don't know, I have to look at it. But just to say that we are doing direct work, and those are people who have gotten air filters. Those are people who, who had, who were vulnerable to health respiratory issues, and they got help through that. That includes, water treatment, and, monitoring of the water and monitoring of the air. So many food substance. Shout out to Mbutu as one of our subgrantees for creating both an air filtering, purifying project, as well as creating, access to healthy foods for our community members. So there are many great things that are being, done on, with whatever funding we get. We definitely directly, to date, knock on wood, we have only employed BIPOC folks in terms of all of our professional service and our vendors and our catering. And so, it can be done. There is no excuse for you. You can't find them. Our printing is a Black printer. So we really believe in doing what we say we're going to do, and building the influence, getting elected officials, putting what something is not actually known as, we are going to, we're going to be involved in a proclamation for one of the cities. So, all of that comes from building the relationships, making sure, we're consistent with our social media. Shout out to our social media team, and photography. And so all of that comes from, not just being noticed, but also being involved and building those relationships. And so that's what we promote for our leaders and our organizations as well. It's not just about writing a grant. It's building that relationship and a partnership, so that when that, funder is thinking of, someone, we have some money to do X, and they know that that's something that you need, they'll reach out to you. Absolutely. And they know you do good work, and they reach out to you. And so, there's a lot of things, it didn't just happen overnight. It was built. And it was mostly coming from the leaders, their word of mouth, starting from the 26 or so members that we had when we first got here. But, the more I think people realize you are who you say you are, the more consistent, the focus is not sexy, but consistency is huge in the community for building trust. Then the more opportunities that come available.
Absolutely. Relationship building and partnerships are an integral part of success wherever you go.
Yeah, wherever you go.
And I just want to ask this question. So the proverb, quote unquote, 2 spiders working together can take down a lion, is featured in your message to the community. How does that guide your approach to leadership?
You got some really great ones. So it's the idea of the bottom top, right? And so, yes, I'm not immune to the fact that direction needs to often come from the top, right? If you don't have any direction, you're lost. We already know that. Try driving anywhere without Google or something these days, right? With no direction, you're lost. But at the same time, if you're not, and going back to my, my management, my hotel management, right, experience, is that, so those top, it's not Michelin because that's restaurants, but there's, the top hotels, right, the 5-star. One of the things that they share in common is the solutions. They get it from the direct contact with the guests. And so if there's an issue, let's say with cleaning or something, it's coming from the cleaning team that gives you the solution. And that's where I feel like sometimes we get lost. We often think that the leader is the one who's supposed to know everything. And that's not possible. There's so many different, for us, there's so many different communities, right? There's so many different, even within some of the nonprofits specialize in different areas, youth, seniors, different things. And so there's no way you can know everything that's going on. Everything changes. And so, you being tapped in to, making sure that you have people that are on the front line who are on the leadership team. To your point, I think I don't know that I addressed that. Our leadership team is, I think everybody has been either a current board member for their community or former. And so that's completely different on how you guys approach, the work. Y'all, without even me ever asking, you attend each other's events, right? There's things you already know because you lead the community, right? You know where the need is, and you just naturally go into it, and you guys take turns, and there is no like, well, Sona did this, and why didn't There's just no complaints, and so that is a difference of having people on the front, from the front lines, is because there's a lot less conflict because you guys already know what is needed, what is currently the pulse of the community. And I think that's where we have a huge advantage. A lot of people, I think most of the team has been around for at least 4 or 5 years, and so they understand, if not, since 2019 at least, I think. So, yeah, I think that I see, that every iteration of the leadership team has been magnificent and has brought structure and has brought, to the minute note taking, templates we still use, has brought something to the table. But what is different is just, like, okay, what can be done in the next iteration that wasn't done in the previously, and what is it that is needed in terms of bringing more community members to the table. And I think that network that you guys naturally have is very easy to understand, like how to tap into that and to bring folks, especially that need that message. You're really good at doing that, right? Like, okay, for whatever traffic safety, we know who to go to.
All right, I promise I'm almost done.
Okay.
I just want us to shift gear a little bit. Youth leadership is an integral part of WSCACL. How does the coalition support the next generation of African descent leaders?
We listen to what they want and how they want to be called. And so one of the first things that was done in 2019 was a question was posed and we make it part of our policy. So in 2019, when the youth group was first being formed, a question was asked to, I think there was about 15 to 20 kids in the room. How do you identify? And each child had a different way to identify. Sometimes it was their specific African community. Sometimes they were African American, or sometimes they were Black. And so, I heard them. And so the next time it came to the bylaw being revised and me being part of the board at that time, I changed the bylaws to reflect our youth. Because that's one thing you understand when you grow up in America is if you don't identify, how are you going to come to the table? Why would I come if you're not talking to me, right? You don't see me. Right? Visibility is huge for our youth. And so that's why that was done. It was, of course, controversial, but it was because of our kids. And ever since then, they have been, especially over their own program, they have been involved in a lot of the decision making. It was, our youth coach, Azana, who was marketing director for the youth program at the time, who created all of their, who designed their merchandise. So they have been a part of it and have identified that this is why they came, because they feel like they're getting skills they can't get at school. And so that's why they were part of it and continue to be a part of it. And so the thing is what is well known, and as a person who has mentored youth for, I hate to say how long, but basically I've been babysitting since I was 9 and mentoring, not that soon after that. I can tell you that, the one thing I know, and I've worked with kids of all races, all races, so indigenous, everybody. And I can tell you the only difference is stages. So when they're in certain stages, they all have that certain things in common. And fundamentally, especially with our immigrant kids, is that lack of being visible in their home. And so it's really important that they know that people are seeing them that look like them. Oftentimes they're getting positive messages by people who don't look like them. And so as the youth know that have been there since 2019 or who have been involved, I never allowed negative talk around our kids. It's it's a no-no. There's no division allowed in front of them. And they also get a quicker response than adults from me because I understood. And why it's important to me is because in my time, everybody went to college. At least all of my peers went to college. What I've seen, more recently is suicide. I've seen a lot of violence, and I know where that comes from. Maybe it wasn't the way I handled what I was dealing with, but I understand where it comes from. And so just connecting with kids, remembering, that times may change. There'll be maybe new technology that you're not aware of, but some of those things, as again, understanding the different stages, it's always there. It doesn't matter where you grow up. And so if we as adults, on to whoever we are, whatever hat we're holding, if we don't recognize that our kids need not just an investment of time, they need an investment of money. As I know I shared in I think their first presentation, if we don't understand that, it's unfortunate because they are our greatest asset. Our greatest community asset is our kids. And they can't grow, they can't become leaders if they're not trained in a way that they know or they understand. And again, for me, I would self-elect to do things. It's not so the case for everybody. And so I understand how to, talk to kids and read them and know where they are and to give them what they need so that they can shine. And, and whether they have a disability or not, I do not criticize them, especially publicly. I never criticize, and really try to foster all of their strengths so they can see they can do a lot more.
And would you attribute that to because you started public service like community service at age 11? I was gonna ask, would it be fair to attribute the fact that you were so passionate about forming this youth group within WSCACL? Would that have anything to do with you being starting community services at a very early age?
Yeah, I think it has to do with breaking cycles. I'm a cycle breaker. And a lot of people, we often do what was done to us, right? And it's just a natural because it's normal to us. But I can, that logical side of me, there is an emotional side. I'm a poet and stuff, but the logical side of me understands fundamentally that the reason I don't do what was done is because I know it's unproductive, honestly. If I yell at a child, what is that going to produce? And also, more importantly, going back to what you said, one of the things that I appreciated for being raised in an immigrant family is that when I asked for money, I wasn't given it. So that made me go to babysit. That's how I became working with kids when I was 9. And that is, I remember because imagine I'm 9 years old. The first thing I did was like everybody, right? I did what was normal. So I was yelling at the kids. I was telling them to do, I was so mean. And what I learned is I learned that, it's a little bit different when you're the parent, but when you're the babysitter who's just there, at first they were like, oh, big kid kind of thing. They're excited. But when they heard and they saw what I was doing, they didn't do anything that I would ask them to do. And, back then, at least parents would give us instruction. I mean, these are students, but parents, but they would give us instructions on like what they wanted to be done, what time they want them to go to bed, what they should eat and all of that. Right. And we would cook, we would have to like cook, it wasn't like complicated meals, but there were meals. And so I'm learning and I was never a liar. And so when they would come home and say like, okay, what time do they go to bed? And I wasn't accomplishing anything. I was so scared I was not going to be able to babysit. It was my motivation. And so I began to learn, okay, so, if they're 2 to 4, I need to talk to them in a gentle tone, and that would get them, so that's how I learned to do what I can do today. And it's natural. I see a child, I can estimate their age, and I go immediately into what way to connect with them, get to their eye level, do all those things. But it was because of that motivation of my money.
Okay. And the next question that I want to ask, looking back, what are some of the most accomplishments that you were proud of since you took over as what's called executive director?
Well, I do want to do a plug for the board that had the vision to bring it together. The boards. I mean, it was founded in 2017. I was not there at all. I came in spring of 2019, and I came in really because of the census project. Was one of the kind of driving forces. I worked on the 2000 census when I was at University of Pennsylvania as a demography fellow, and so I have a demography background. And I knew how we were undercounted severely, right? So I just want to say that, credit to where credit is due, and the founders who had this vision, some of them who are still engaged, some of them have moved on, but the idea of, sorry, what was the question? Like what
it's
part?
Okay, I was just asking, what accomplishments are you
Okay,
most proud of? Yeah, since you took over as the executive director.
I'm most proud of how many permanent volunteers we've had. When we first came, there were 8 committees and 3 people, and we brought that down, and it was a fight, but we brought it down to 2 committees. And it fluctuates, which always does, between 6 and like 25 or something. And I'm not so. I know because of the work that 6 people or 4 people can be very powerful. And so now it shocks, I think, other people, but it doesn't shock me because what I've learned, and I did co-found with actually my cousin, an Ethiopian professional, like nonprofit, and that I learned from that experience. I think if I hadn't had that experience, I would know that what we are really good at is executing the work. So the week before an event, 2 weeks, we can execute, but planning is not our forte. And it may be a few of us, but not the majority. And so it doesn't shock me. The fact of, still being consistent and doing all those things. We did different experiments on the frequency of committee meetings and all that. And in the end, twice a month was the best. But what to this day, I guess, I'm most proud of is the fact that, that people know who WSCACL is, that we went from, I think, what did we have, like 25 people who applied the first time we had a part-time, a contracted position open, and that was in like August of 2024. And then the second time in February of 2025, we had 335 applicants. Wow. And so that was just one position. The second position was another 25. So the fact that it was the first time that I'm going into these meetings and meeting candidates, and they're like, "Oh, I know WSCACL." I'm like, "Really? You're not even from our community?" So I'm like, wow, like the name has gotten out there. The brand is being recognized, and from elected officials on I met the mayor of Linwood, and she was like, oh yeah, she knew, and I've never met her before, so just the fact that, the work and the positive, I'm sure there's negative too, but the positive association with the brand is, again, a credit to everybody who's been involved. And the fact that it seems to be synonymous with trust, and that, like, we don't have like a made up, organization. And because there's that too, but so that, to me, I'm still, at awe with. And again, I know we chose to invest in the website and social media early on because we were told by a funder nobody knew us. So that is paying off dividends as well, as, like I said, most of it's word of mouth.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the summit, the upcoming summit.
Okay.
For
The fall summit.
Right, the fall. Okay. For those who are unfamiliar with WSCACL's
Annual summit.
annual summit, what is it about, and who should attend it?
So it is a space for, all, it started, I think in 2017 or something was the first one. And it's a space for, the communities to come together and to learn and to make plans. And in the previous summits, I know President Cuojo, and I know Tina, like, they have created poverty reports and presented that to, I don't know if it was the governor maybe, but elected officials, we'll just say elected officials. So there's been a lot of, like, from the gatherings, like, action oriented of the summit, and, to with the idea of, like, what we're going to execute in the next year. I think the issue has been, at least previously, it was the funding. So there wasn't a lot of funding to execute, I think, some of those really great projects and findings that came out of previous summits. And so, but we have utilized that data, in reports, some of that data, but and we've, accessed that as things that the community wants, and been able to push for some things, but I think that it has generally been consistently a place where, experts, elected officials, come and, and then kind of, contribute. There's always a survey usually done at the end, to find out, okay, what is the next topic, or what are the most important topics for the next year? That's been the general.
All right, and tell those that will be watching this, for this year's summit, how do WSCACL plan to, like, with the summit, how is it going to help, strengthen the collaboration that is already existing between the African community groups?
Yeah, and this year's is going to be a little bit different. So it is going to be the entire diaspora, and that is going to be present, and not just in, participating, in let's just say in multiple ways, right? And so from, the food, from, different vendors, and it is about community power, community wealth is this theme. And united we stand, divided we fall. And so we're gonna touch on the things that we know our members want, because remember, we go back to that 90% sole proprietors. but we're doing a twist, so we're gonna actually talk about how to scale, into, like, the importance of scaling to get those government contracts, the bigger government contracts. We're going to touch on that for small businesses. That's always a huge interest in our member organizations, and also within their community members. We're also going to have some elected officials who will talk about the importance of local elections, like what that actually can do for a community. And then we also will have kind of the ABCs of running your nonprofit. Like, how do you protect from maintaining your 501c3? Since we've seen people lose that. So we're going to just talk about like the basics. And then, so those are some of the things that we're highlighting. Of course, the leadership team will be involved in that, in setting that agenda as well. But just the high demand, I think also, sorry, it did come, immigration resources. We're going to have some information, like tips maybe from an immigration attorney. We're looking for that because that was a big request from the leadership team. And so, yeah, we're looking to make it hands-on, practical, things that they can walk away with, as well as to encourage, we'll have some entertainment, but we'll have, connections and networking, because that's something I'm going to touch on in my presentation is building, that your network is your net worth. That book by Porter Gale, the importance of that, because it just feels, it seems like a lot of people are not aware that it's not just about one or two people. You really need to build your network and build those relationships if you want to be independently wealthy, whatever it is that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And just quickly, out of curiosity, you briefly mentioned what the theme is going to be. How do you how does WSCACL decide on what the theme would be like each year of the summit?
Oh, that's a good question. Did I mention I'm a writer? So sometimes it just comes to me. I don't know previously, but I would say I think the last two I may have done. Yeah, like the actual theme. Oh no, I think the one we did. Yeah, the build Black better. Yeah, that's right. That one was during the pandemic when we got 500 people online for that summit. So normally our summits are, between 100 and 125 that show up for our in-person summits. But when we did it online during the pandemic, we did have 500 with, I think, about 2,000 that were looking past, after the summit.
And the last thing that I want to ask about the summit, right, before we conclude this interview, is that would there be opportunity for new or smaller organizations or just an individual who wants to make a difference in, their community to get involved? Would there be such opportunities for them?
At the summit?
Yes, to get involved in the summit and be part of it.
Can you explain that? Like to
Yeah,
plan
so
it or to
no, to get involved. You know how you organize the summit, right? And then invitations will be sent out and all of that. But my question is, say there are organizations or smaller groups out there that maybe are not even part of WSCACL yet, but want to be part of the summit. What opportunities are there? Are there opportunities for them that they can utilize to be part of the summit that WSCACL is planning?
Yeah, everybody's welcome to come. It's not just for members, right? Okay. Yeah. So there's definitely, and we'll probably identify members from non-members, but like everyone has generally been welcome to come, and we get a lot of people who actually just show up for the summit, honestly, but and from all communities actually, but. If they want to be involved with volunteering, they're welcome to volunteer. Yeah, they're welcome to. Yeah, they're for like that day. We've had before, like I think planning committees and people are like, hey, I want to be involved in just volunteering for that event. We definitely will open that up for those who are interested. It's a great way because we do give information and help and support people when we're doing the planning. But it's all on Zoom, so they're welcome to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So if you could sum up WSCACL's mission in one word for someone who is, going to watch this interview, what would you say?
Community power. Oh, one word. Sorry, power.
One sentence.
One sentence. Community power.
Yeah. All right, nice. And how can individuals, even if they are not part of an organization, because I'm sure there are, a lot of people
You
out
have
there
about
that are
100.
not
Yeah, over 100.
exactly, how can they support, like, if they want to be part of WSCACL, even though, like I mentioned, they are not part of an organization or a group, how can they reach out and be a part of it?
So the easiest way, because the primary reason a lot of people will reach out is they're like, they moved to the state or they heard about, WSCACL from other places, from someone else, and they want to be part of a community, right? And to get that right feel, the easiest way to get that is, I hammer on this, but you need to build the relationships. The best way to build a relationship is to attend the committees. Okay. And those are always open. You don't have to be a member to attend. But that's how they get to know the leaders. They get to understand, okay, you can ask questions at the end. We always open that up, especially for like any announcements, anything going on. So if you have a business, if you have, something that like, but the whole idea that, I don't know what it is, but that whole idea that you're going to get clients by just staying in your room and developing your business. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, in your house and developing your business. And it could be the greatest idea and it could be a high demand. But if you don't know people, how are you going to, unless you're just selling it to your family, like, is your point, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's whatever, like photography services, is your point to sell it to one person or is it to build? And so I think the biggest way, whatever it is that you want to do as your hustle or your business, or just even to be involved in a like-minded group of individuals, how about that? Let's just bring it to that point, is to come and to learn. I can't make that for you. Yes, you can provide your services for free for a prize or something like that, but you're still not going to develop the relationship. Then let's not forget, all of us need someone sometime. Mm-hmm. All of us need someone. No matter how healthy you are, we will always need something from someone sometime. And you never know who that is. And I guess because I saw my dad pour into so many people, as well as my mom. But, in the end, people who you think will support you are not always the ones that you think, right? Yeah. And so the more I feel like you serve, the more likely you'll find, your tribe, if you want to say that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Connections and participations matter. And finally, Martha, what is your vision, or what are your vision for WSCACL 5 years from now?
My vision for WSCACL from 5 years from now is that it's a multi-million-dollar organization in revenue, where it's diversified into investments, into, like multiple streams is basically of, income that's sustainable, including endowments, and that there's a new leader who, maybe they came directly from the youth program, but or from staff, who knows, but just that there's leadership that has a connection to the community in some way. Again, whether it's from the program, the youth program, the staff, the leadership team, it doesn't, but there's a connection. So there's trust, and that it's continuing to grow and to thrive. And if we're at 10 million, they're working to make it 20. But just that continual challenge is happening in goal setting with the team.
Okay. All right. Any final words?
Just really appreciate the opportunity to share, and the questions were very actually good. I don't think some people ever asked me some of those questions, but just really look forward to seeing WSCACL continue to grow. I think that sometimes when you're part of something, it's hard to let go, and I could see how people feel in that way. But honestly, my strive has always been that it would be sustainable, and by investing in our member organizations, never knowing who's going to do what, people can move away, people can decide to move into the position. But I feel like the more that you open yourself up to mentor, the more likely, you will no longer, you will work yourself out of a job. And that has been my goal, even though people may not think that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Martha, for your insight and sharing the work that WSCACL is doing. It's very inspirational. And if you are part of a community organization here in Washington, I would highly recommend that you connect with WSCACL, whether that is joining their being part of their program or their committees, or just making a difference and supporting their initiative. As long as you are passionate about being part of a greater cause, I would encourage you to please reach out to WSCACL. And all this information that was shared by the executive director Martha can be found on their website at wascal.org. That is WSCACL.org. If we stand together and unity and empowerment, that is how we will attain a success. So I please employing on all of you to please reach out to WSCACL leadership. And with that, thank you so much, and please do not forget to like, share, and stay engaged.
Yeah.